The HOA fined me $2,000 for repairing my own boat dock. What they didn't know was that the only convenient route their residents used to reach the lake crossed my private shoreline, and the agreement allowing that access could be terminated. Welcome back, everyone. If you enjoy stories about ordinary homeowners standing up to HOA overreach, subscribe and turn on notifications. And before we begin, tell me where you're watching from today. Now settle in, because this one started with 2 rotten dock boards and ended with an entire neighborhood learning the difference between access and ownership. Lorraine Beckett made 2 mistakes before breakfast. The first was zip tying a $2,000 HOA fine to a dock she didn't own. The second was forgetting that nearly every Silver Pines resident who walked to the lake got there because I allowed them to cross my shoreline. At 6:52 on a cold May morning, I was kneeling beside the shore power pedestal with a voltage tester when a red notice zip tied to my stainless steel cleat caught my eye. HOA violation, $2,000 fine. Unauthorized private boat dock modification. My name is Garrett Whitmore. I was 49 then, a marine refrigeration technician, and I had owned that cottage and waterfront parcel for 17 years. I knew every board on that dock. The week before, Franklin Yates had replaced a corroded shore power pedestal and 2 rotten cedar planks. Same location, same footprint. Nothing had been extended into the water. I photographed the notice before touching it. Behind me came the electric whine of a golf cart. Lorraine Beckett rolled down the shoreline lane with Janice Porter beside her. Lorraine stepped out wearing white slacks, a navy blouse, and dark sunglasses, with the kind of calm expression people wear when they think the paperwork has already decided the argument. Good morning, Garrett. Morning. She glanced at the notice. I see you received it. I did. You performed exterior waterfront modifications without Architectural Review Committee approval. I looked at my dock, then at her. Does Silver Pines own this dock? Her smile tightened. Anything affecting the visual character of our waterfront falls under community standards. That wasn't my question. Janice lowered her eyes toward the clipboard in her lap. Lorraine folded her arms. You live directly beside Silver Pines Landing. Your property affects the appearance and enjoyment of the community. Show me the recorded document giving Silver Pines architectural authority over my parcel. For half a second, only water slapped against the pilings. Then Lorraine said, You have 30 days to submit a retroactive application. Additional enforcement costs may apply if you refuse. I cut the zip tie and slid the notice into my toolbox. Behind Lorraine, a father and teenage son carried a blue kayak down the narrow shoreline path, crossed beside my cedar post, and continued toward the launch. Lorraine barely looked at them. I did. Near the post, half hidden beneath wet grass, was an old bronze survey cap marking a boundary my father had once taught me never to ignore. I photographed that too. The dock, the repairs, the notice, the path, the marker. Lorraine climbed back into the golf cart. I hope we can resolve this cooperatively. So do I. The cart hummed away. 10 minutes later, another Silver Pines couple came down carrying paddleboards. I stepped aside and let them pass. They smiled. I smiled back. Then I stood there listening to their footsteps disappear toward the water. Lorraine thought she had just fined me for changing a dock. What she hadn't noticed was far more important. Every resident walking to that launch was crossing land that had never belonged to Silver Pines. For 17 years, I had allowed it because neighbors should be neighbors. But permission and ownership are not the same thing. Lorraine was about to learn exactly how expensive that difference could become. 17 years earlier, there was no Silver Pines Landing. There were survey stakes, muddy tire tracks, and a billboard promising luxury homes. My cottage and shoreline were already there. I was 32 when I bought the place because I wanted enough water frontage to keep a workboat without asking anyone's permission. The deed included a narrow strip running along the lake between the future subdivision and a small kayak launch farther east. 3 months after closing, a representative for the developer knocked on my door. He carried rolled plans under one arm. We have an access problem. That sounds expensive. He laughed. It turned out Silver Pines had a launch area, but no convenient pedestrian route from several planned streets without sending residents the long way around. The easiest path crossed my land. They wanted permission, not ownership. I hired an attorney before signing anything. The final agreement allowed Silver Pines residents to walk through one defined shoreline corridor to reach the launch. Pedestrians only. No golf carts. No storage. No permanent structures. No widening the route. And nothing transferred ownership of my property. For years, that was exactly how it worked. Residents carried fishing rods, kayaks, towels, and coolers through the corridor. They waved. I waved. Nobody planted signs, measured my shoreline, or told me what color my dock should be. My father helped me replace several cedar boards during my first summer there. One afternoon, he scraped dirt away from a small bronze survey cap near the old sycamore. "What's that?" I asked. "Something you don't lose track of?" He tapped it with his boot. "A neighbor can use your gate without owning your yard." Dad had spent 40 years repairing heavy equipment. He wasn't a lawyer, but he understood boundaries. So did I. For a long time, Silver Pines did too. Then the developer finished the neighborhood and eventually transferred control to the homeowners. Boards changed. Managers changed. The newsletters got glossier. Lorraine Beckett became president. That was when the language started changing. The original paperwork called it a licensed shoreline access corridor. A newsletter later called it resident lake access. Then a community map labeled the route waterfront access. By Lorraine's second year, Silver Pines marketing material was calling the area community waterfront. I noticed. I just didn't understand yet how much those words mattered. One Saturday, 2 Adirondack chairs appeared beyond the path. I moved them back. A week later, Silver Pines landscapers started trimming near my cedar post. I stopped them, showed the supervisor the boundary, and he left. That afternoon, Lorraine called. "You interrupted association maintenance. On my property. We're trying to maintain a consistent waterfront appearance. Maintain your path." She went quiet. Then she said, "Residents have enjoyed that shoreline for nearly 2 decades. Using something for years doesn't tell me who owns it." Her tone cooled. "We should try to be reasonable, Garrett." I thought I was. No lawyers appeared that day. No police. No gate. After that, I noticed the pattern. A kayak left overnight, a landscaping flag beyond the corridor, a website photograph presenting my shoreline as part of Silver Pines. Permission had begun turning into expectation. Expectation was becoming entitlement. And Lorraine was slowly replacing the most important word in the original agreement. Licensed. She talked about the shoreline as though Silver Pines had always controlled it. The bronze survey cap stayed exactly where Dad had shown me. So did my deed. Lorraine could change the language in every newsletter she printed. She couldn't move either of those. The first time Silver Pines advertised my shoreline as theirs, I almost admired the confidence. The glossy brochure showed 2 couples carrying kayaks beneath the words Silver Pines Landing, exclusive private waterfront access. In the background were my cedar post, my shoreline, and the corner of my dock. I called Lorraine. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Did you approve the new brochure?" I reviewed it, yes. "You're advertising my property. We're advertising resident amenities. The shoreline in that photograph belongs to me." A pause. "Garrett, residents have waterfront access. They have permission to cross a defined path. That distinction isn't meaningful to prospective homeowners. It's meaningful to the person paying property taxes on it." She exhaled slowly. "We're not claiming ownership." "Then stop advertising it like you are." 2 days later, 4 Adirondack chairs appeared under the sycamore, outside the licensed corridor, on my grass. I photographed them and moved them back. The following week, a wooden kayak rack with an HOA asset sticker appeared in the same area. I called Janice. By sunset, it was gone. Then landscapers crossed beyond the path and began cutting near the bronze survey cap. Their Silver Pines work order showed a maintenance boundary several yards beyond the actual corridor. I photographed it, showed the supervisor the problem, and the crew left without argument. Lorraine didn't. She called 20 minutes later. "You cannot keep interfering with association contractors. They were standing on my land. We maintain the waterfront for everyone's benefit. You maintain the route I allowed you to use." Her voice sharpened. "You're creating unnecessary conflict." "No, Lorraine. I'm identifying a property line." That week, Franklin Yates replaced the cracked shore power pedestal housing and 2 soft cedar boards. Same locations, same dock dimensions, no extension, no new structure. 7 days later, another red envelope appeared. This one was taped to my front door. Final notice of violation. $2,000. Failure to obtain architectural approval for waterfront modifications. Rain ticked against the porch roof while I read it. Below the fine was a demand for a retroactive application including photographs, materials, dimensions, colors, and a review fee. I laughed once. Then I stopped. Submitting that application would mean asking Silver Pines to approve work on property I had never agreed they controlled. I placed the notice beside the first one. Then I opened a folder. Brochure, photographs, landscaping work order, kayak rack, fine notices, dates, names. Everything went inside. The next morning, Lorraine passed in her golf cart while I was checking the dock. She slowed. You received our notice? I did. I hope you'll comply. I looked past her. 2 residents were walking down my shoreline, carrying fishing rods. They waved. I waved back. Lorraine followed my eyes, but said nothing. That was when I understood the fight had changed. This wasn't about 2 cedar boards or an electrical pedestal anymore. Lorraine had spent years turning access into an amenity into an expectation into authority. Now she wanted my signature underneath it. Too bad for her. The more she tried to prove Silver Pines controlled my shoreline, the more paperwork she gave me proving exactly how far she had crossed the line. If Silver Pines doesn't own my dock, why am I sitting here asking permission to repair it? Nobody answered. At the HOA hearing, Lorraine sat with Janice and 3 board members while I placed my folder on the table. Lorraine adjusted her glasses. Mr. Whitmore, this hearing concerns your failure to obtain architectural approval before modifying a waterfront structure. I understand what the notice says. Then this should be straightforward. She slid a form across the table. Retroactive architectural application. There were boxes for materials, colors, dimensions, contractor information, photographs, and a review fee. I didn't touch it. I opened my folder. Deed, before and after photographs, Franklin's invoice, and measurements showing no expansion or footprint change. Lorraine barely looked at them. The issue isn't whether the repairs were necessary. Good. Then show me the recorded document that gives Silver Pines architectural jurisdiction over my parcel. Her expression changed slightly. Not much. Just enough. Our architectural guidelines apply to improvements affecting the visual character of the community. I leaned forward. Does Silver Pines own my dock? That is not the issue before the board. It's exactly the issue. Lorraine tapped the application. You live adjacent to Silver Pines Landing and benefit from the standards maintained by this association. I don't belong to this association. You share the waterfront environment. So do the ducks. Janice looked down. Lorraine didn't smile. The board is offering you an opportunity to resolve this without further enforcement. By signing that. Yes. I pushed it back. I'm not applying for permission from an organization that hasn't shown me it has authority over my property. The room went quiet. Lorraine folded her hands. Then the $2,000 fine remains outstanding. Continued noncompliance may result in additional fines, enforcement costs, or referral to legal counsel. Put that in writing. We will. Good. That afternoon, I called Margaret Ellis. She was a property attorney with a voice so calm it could make bad news sound organized. I explained everything. The dock, the access path, the brochures, the contractors, the hearing. When I finished, she asked one question. Do Silver Pines residents still cross your shoreline? Every day. Don't close it. I stared through my kitchen window toward the lake. Why not? Because right now Lorraine wants 2 stories to become one. She wants the dock dispute and shoreline access treated as proof that Silver Pines controls your waterfront. So I keep letting them through. For now, don't retaliate. Don't move barriers. Don't give her a new argument before we know exactly what that old agreement says. That wasn't the answer I wanted. It was probably why I trusted her. That evening, I organized dates, emails, notices, photographs, and Franklin's original measurements confirming the footprint had not changed. Then I walked outside. A family came down the path carrying paddleboards. Their little boy waved. I opened the shoreline gate for them. Thanks, Gare. No problem. The latch clicked behind them. Near the sycamore, wet grass curled around the bronze survey cap. I could have locked the gate. I didn't. Lorraine had fines and letterhead. I had a deed, a boundary marker, an attorney, and 17 years of history she apparently hadn't read. She wanted my signature acknowledging her authority. I gave her nothing. And while she prepared her next enforcement letter, Margaret started looking for the one document that could tell us whose rules actually mattered. The morning Lorraine started measuring my shoreline, I understood the $2,000 fine had never been the real problem. At 7:14, A truck door slammed beyond the cottage. 3 contractors stood near the sycamore with a measuring wheel, laser level, orange flags, and a tablet. One man was stretching a tape across my grass. "Morning," I said. "What are we building?" The foreman checked the tablet. "Silver Pines waterfront improvements." "Where?" He turned the screen toward me. The plan showed a railing, low-voltage lighting, 2 benches, expanded kayak storage, and a small gathering area. The drawing used the phrase community waterfront enhancement. Half of the proposed work sat outside the narrow access corridor and on the parcel I paid taxes on. Who authorized this? Lorraine Beckett. I photographed the work order and the plan. The marked corridor is the only area Silver Pines has permission to use. Don't install anything outside it. The foreman looked back at the drawing. We were told the association controlled this shoreline. They don't. He called his office. 10 minutes later, the crew packed up. They were professionals caught in somebody else's boundary dispute, and I had no reason to make them the enemy. By lunch, Lorraine had already rewritten the morning. Her email went to the entire community. A neighboring property owner is obstructing long-established resident waterfront rights and delaying planned shoreline improvements. She didn't use my name. She didn't need to. I forwarded it to Margaret. Her reply was 2 words. Save everything. Saturday was Silver Pines Lake Day. Golf carts hummed down the hill before 9. Families came through carrying kayaks, coolers, fishing rods, and paddleboards. Kids ran ahead in bright life jackets. Most people smiled at me because most people had no idea there was a property dispute. That made Lorraine's strategy more effective. If I locked the gate, she could point at disappointed families and say I had taken away their lake. If I left it open, she could keep presenting 17 years of permission as proof that Silver Pines controlled the shoreline. Around 11, Janice came down with 2 temporary signs and a volunteer behind her carrying a folding table. The signs read Silver Pines Resident Waterfront. The table was headed toward the grass beneath my sycamore. I stepped in front of them. "Where's that going?" Janice stopped. "Lorraine wants a check-in table near the waterfront." "Near the waterfront or on my parcel?" The volunteer looked from her to me. Janice lowered her voice. "Garrett, it's only for today. That doesn't change the property line." A man waiting with a fishing rod heard us. I thought this was HOA land. Lorraine arrived before Janice could answer. She came down in the golf cart, parked beside the path, and walked straight toward me. "Garrett, this is a community event." "I know. You're disrupting it in front of residents." "No. I'm keeping your equipment off property you don't own." She looked at the people gathering around us. "Residents have used this waterfront for 17 years. Because they were allowed to cross a defined corridor. That is your interpretation. It's also the reason I keep asking you for a document that says otherwise." For the first time, several residents were listening to the question instead of just hearing Lorraine's answer. One woman glanced at the sign in Janice's hands. The man with the fishing rod looked down at the path beneath his shoes. Lorraine's smile disappeared. "We are not litigating property rights at Lake Day." "Good. Then keep the event inside the rights Silver Pines actually has." I didn't close the path. I didn't stop anyone from carrying a kayak through. Janice took the signs and table back toward association property, and the event continued. But Lorraine had lost something small and important. The assumption that nobody would ask what community waterfront actually meant. Monday brought a letter from the HOA's legal counsel. It demanded that I stop interfering with what it called established association access and comply with architectural review requirements. The letter never identified a recorded instrument giving Silver Pines architectural authority over my dock. I drove to Margaret's office and put it on her desk. "They're planning structures on my land, advertising the shoreline, and fining me for my dock. How long do I keep pretending this is normal?" "You don't." Then I closed the gate. "Not yet." I hated those 2 words. Margaret folded her hands. Being generous for 17 years may have taught them the wrong lesson. But before you withdraw anything, I want the original developer agreement, every exhibit attached to it, and the recorded property documents. We find out exactly what they have before we decide exactly what you can take away. That evening, I walked the shoreline alone. Orange paint remained where the contractor had marked a proposed railing several feet beyond the path. I crouched beside the bronze survey cap. For 17 years, families had crossed my property because I chose to be a good neighbor. Now that kindness was being used to make resistance look unreasonable. That was Lorraine's best weapon. She didn't need to prove she owned the shoreline if she could make everyone believe I was cruel for insisting that she didn't. My phone rang. Margaret. Garrett, I found the developer's original file. I stood slowly. And, come in tomorrow. Across the water, a kayak paddle flashed in the sunset. Lorraine thought the next move belonged to her. She was wrong. The document Margaret placed in front of me had been waiting 17 years for somebody like Lorraine Beckett to misunderstand it. I reached her office at 8:30 Tuesday morning. A man I hadn't met was already sitting at the conference table. Garrett, this is Wesley Boone, Margaret said. Licensed land surveyor. Wesley shook my hand, then unrolled a survey beside a thick developer file. Margaret turned the first document toward me. Read the title. Revocable Shoreline Access License. I stared at the word. License. Exactly. Not a deed, ownership transfer, or permanent easement. The agreement allowed Silver Pines residents pedestrian passage through one specifically described corridor across my waterfront parcel to reach the launch. No vehicles, no storage, no permanent structures, no expansion outside the defined strip, and absolutely nothing gave Silver Pines architectural authority over my dock. Wesley tapped the survey. I checked the recorded description against the original plat. His finger traced a narrow line along the shoreline. This is their permitted corridor. Then he pointed farther inland. This is where the proposed benches and kayak storage were marked. Outside it, he slid several photographs toward me. One showed the old sycamore. Another showed the bronze survey cap with a measuring rod beside it. That marker is still where the recorded control points say it should be. I thought about Dad scraping dirt from that same piece of bronze 17 summers earlier. A neighbor can use your gate without owning your yard. Margaret turned 3 pages. Now this is the part Lorraine should have read. The paragraph was dense, but one sentence changed everything. The owner retained the right to terminate the license, after required written notice, if the association materially exceeded the permitted use or interfered with the owner's waterfront property rights. I looked up. So I can close the path? Margaret raised one finger. You can invoke the termination procedure. Those are different statements, and we're going to respect the difference. That was why she was my attorney. What about later amendments? I checked them. She had reviewed recorded instruments, developer transfers, association documents, and everything she could locate affecting the parcel. Nothing she found converted the license into a permanent easement. Nothing transferred my shoreline. Nothing granted Silver Pines control over my dock. Then Margaret opened my evidence folder. The glossy brochure, photographs of Adirondack chairs, the landscaping work order, the kayak rack, Lorraine's community email, the contractor plan, the architectural application. Finally, the red $2,000 violation notice. Margaret tapped the stack. She documented the expansion herself. I picked up the fine. So they fined the man who was letting their residents cross his property. That's what the paperwork shows. I laughed once. 17 years of assumptions had suddenly become one clean distinction. Silver Pines had access because permission had been granted. Lorraine had treated that permission like jurisdiction. By trying to control my dock and expand the shoreline area, she had created the record Margaret needed to challenge that assumption. I drove home with copies of everything. 2 residents carrying fishing gear approached the path as I reached the cedar post. Morning, Gare. Morning. I let them pass. I didn't lock anything, confront Lorraine, or touch the orange markings. Wesley returned that afternoon and documented the corridor, boundary points, and bronze cap. Franklin photographed the repaired dock and confirmed its footprint remained unchanged. Margaret began drafting formal notice. At sunset, I stood beside the stainless steel cleat where Lorraine's first fine had been attached. For weeks, she had demanded that I follow Silver Pines' rules. Fine. I would follow a rule too. Not hers. The one written into the agreement that allowed her neighborhood to reach the water in the first place. The notice reached Silver Pines 3 different ways: certified mail, email, and overnight delivery. Margaret wanted no room for anyone to pretend it had disappeared. The heading filled half the first page. Notice of material breach and intent to terminate shoreline access license. There were no insults and no threats. Just dates, photographs, survey references, and documented conduct. Landscaping outside the corridor, storage attempts, planned permanent improvements, expanded waterfront use, and architectural enforcement against property Silver Pines did not own. The agreement required written notice and a defined period to cure the breach before termination. We followed it exactly. Lorraine answered before noon. Silver Pines rejected my interpretation and considered resident shoreline access a long-established community right. Then she added another enforcement charge to the dock violation. I printed it. Franklin saw the page on my workbench. She's still fining you? She thinks more paper makes the first paper true. He looked at the folders beside me. That seems risky considering how much paper you have. The notice period started running. I changed nothing. Families still crossed the path. I still opened the gate. The association had been formally warned, and Margaret's instruction was simple. Give them every chance to step back. Lorraine stepped forward instead. 3 days after receiving the notice, she sent residents another message announcing that Silver Pines would continue protecting uninterrupted waterfront access while legal counsel addresses a neighboring owner's challenge. A second email said the waterfront enhancement project remained an association priority. Janice requested updated contractor estimates. Someone planted another orange flag near the sycamore. Then a laminated sign appeared on a portable stake beside the corridor. Resident access. HOA authorized. I called Margaret before touching it. Photograph it, she said. Then if it's outside the licensed area, tell them in writing to remove it. Don't turn this into a contest over who can move the most objects. Wesley came out that afternoon. The stake sat 18 inches outside the corridor. He photographed it against his survey marks. I emailed Janice, copied the HOA attorney, and asked that it be removed. It was gone by evening. Lorraine replied to the email herself. Your continued hostility toward normal community operations will be documented. I forwarded that to Margaret too. Should we answer? I asked. No. She keeps escalating. Good, Margaret said, then corrected herself. Not good for the neighborhood. Good for clarity. She received formal notice. Let her decide how much evidence she wants to create before the clock expires. Waiting was harder than arguing. Every morning I expected another contractor, another sign, another letter. Instead, I kept doing ordinary things. I serviced compressors at the marina. I replaced a dock line. I drank coffee on the porch while Silver Pines residents carried kayaks through the corridor as if nothing had changed. That normality made the situation stranger. People were still using a privilege while their board president was insisting the privilege prove control over the land beneath it. On the final afternoon of the cure period, 2 teenagers came down carrying a yellow kayak. One of them held the gate while the other backed through. Thanks, Mr. Whitmore. Have fun. Weather turns after 6. They headed toward the launch. At 5:01, my phone rang. Margaret, the required notice period has expired. I looked at the cedar post. Did they cure the breach? No. Their counsel has not withdrawn the architectural claim, and the association continued conduct we identified in the notice. And now the license is terminated under its written procedure. Stay strictly inside Wesley's survey. No improvising. Friday morning, Wesley arrived first. He checked the bronze cap, measured the corridor again, and marked the placement line. Franklin came behind him with cedar posts, hinges, fencing, and a pedestrian gate. Every post stayed inside my surveyed parcel. Nothing touched public water. Nothing blocked neighboring property. We did not touch Silver Pines launch. We only closed the route across my land. By 10:40, Franklin tightened the final hinge. I mounted one sign. Private property. HOA access closed. The latch clicked. At 11:03, I heard the familiar electric whine. Lorraine's golf cart stopped 20 feet away. She climbed out so fast Janice barely had time to set down her clipboard. What did you do? I followed the agreement. You cannot block Silver Pines residents from the lake. I'm not blocking the lake. I pointed toward the shoreline beneath us. I'm stopping Silver Pines from crossing my land. This is retaliation over the architectural violation. No, your association exceeded the access license. You received notice. You had the cure period. It expired. We do not recognize your termination. Then your attorney can call Margaret. Behind the golf cart, a couple approached carrying paddleboards. They stopped when they saw the gate. That part didn't feel satisfying. They hadn't fined me or sent contractors onto my grass. I walked toward them. The HOA's old access license has been terminated. I'm sorry you got caught in the middle, but you'll need another lawful route until the board resolves this. Lorraine turned toward them. You see what he's doing to the community? I looked at her. No, Lorraine. They're seeing what happened after you were warned to stay inside the rights you actually had. For once, she had nothing ready. I stepped through the gate and closed it behind me. Click. 17 years of assumptions ended with one small sound. I hadn't taken their launch, claimed the lake, or damaged a thing. I had withdrawn a route across my property under the procedure written into the agreement. Lorraine had spent weeks demanding that I respect her authority. Now she was standing outside my gate because she had never bothered to understand mine. The first person Lorraine called after the gate closed wasn't her attorney. It was the county sheriff's office. A deputy arrived 40 minutes later. I met him beside the cedar gate with Margaret's folder under my arm. Lorraine was already there. He blocked community lake access, she said. The deputy looked at me. Your property? The land beneath this gate is. And the lake? Not mine. I'm not claiming it. I handed him my deed, Wesley's survey, the original access license, and Margaret's termination notice. The association used this corridor under a written license. That license was terminated according to its procedure. He studied the documents, then looked toward the kayak launch beyond my parcel. So the launch still exists? Yes. You're only restricting passage across this property? Exactly. He handed everything back. This looks like a property matter for your attorneys. Lorraine stepped forward. Silver Pines has used this route for 17 years. I understand, he said, but I'm not deciding property rights on the roadside. He left. The gate stayed closed. By Monday, Silver Pines' attorney had contacted Margaret. By Tuesday afternoon, the tone changed. The HOA suspended all waterfront enforcement against me while council reviewed the governing documents. 2 days later, Margaret forwarded me another letter. The $2,000 dock fine was rescinded. So were the additional enforcement charges. I printed the letter and slipped it behind Lorraine's original red notice. That should have ended it. Instead, residents asked why their route had disappeared. Then board emails began circulating. Private property marketed as community waterfront, contractors planning improvements outside the corridor, and architectural enforcement aimed at a dock outside HOA jurisdiction. One message showed a director asking whether the association actually owned the shoreline. Lorraine's response was 6 words. Residents have always had waterfront rights. Other emails approved landscaping and the improvement plan. Then someone produced my $2,000 violation, the clearest evidence of how far Lorraine had stretched HOA authority. The waterfront project was canceled. Janice called me personally. Silver Pines is removing the remaining markers. Good. The board is also evaluating alternative access on association-controlled property. That sounds appropriate. There was a pause. Garrett, for what it's worth, I'm sorry this went this far. I know you didn't start it. 3 weeks after the gate closed, Silver Pines held a special board meeting. I stayed home. The next morning, Margaret called. They removed Lorraine as president under the bylaws. Still on the board? For now. She wasn't for long. Lorraine resigned shortly afterward. No screaming match, handcuffs, or television cameras. Just consequences arriving one document at a time for a president who had stretched authority past the property line. Franklin stopped by that evening. We stood near the dock while sunset turned the water copper. He nodded toward the gate. You won. I looked at him. I got my property back. That sounds like winning. Maybe. But the families had not created this mess, so I wasn't celebrating their inconvenience. I was celebrating clarity. The signs and orange flags disappeared. Golf carts stopped coming down my shoreline. I walked onto the dock and rested my hand on the stainless steel cleat. A faint scratch remained where Lorraine had zip-tied that first red notice. $2,000. That fine was supposed to prove Silver Pines controlled my dock. Instead, it forced everyone to open the documents Lorraine should have read before she ever issued it. She wanted authority over my waterfront. What she lost was permission to cross it. 3 months after Lorraine lost her presidency, somebody from Silver Pines finally came to my house without a violation notice. He knocked. That mattered. Douglas Ramsey, the new board president, stood on my porch with a thin folder. Garrett Whitmore. That's me. I'm Douglas Ramsey, new board president. I heard. He held up a thin folder. I'd like to talk about shoreline access. I stepped outside. Douglas glanced toward the lake. We investigated alternative routes. And the northern option needs grading, drainage work, and additional permitting. Expensive. Very. I waited. He shifted the folder under his arm. So we're asking this time. There it was. Asking. Not notifying. Not enforcing. not pretending 17 years of permission had magically become ownership. At my kitchen table, Douglas proposed a defined pedestrian corridor. No golf carts, no storage, no permanent structures without my written consent. Silver Pines would help maintain it, carry appropriate insurance, disclaim ownership of my shoreline and architectural jurisdiction over my dock, and accept a clear termination procedure. "I'm not signing today," I said. "I didn't expect you to. Margaret reviews everything." I was hoping she would. That answer helped. Margaret changed several paragraphs anyway. Douglas accepted them. 2 weeks later, we signed. I kept the cedar gate. That mattered too. The residents could use the route again, but now everyone understood why it opened. Permission, documented, limited, and revocable under agreed terms. The first Saturday afterward, I was replacing a weathered dock line when I heard the latch. A family came through carrying 2 kayaks. The little girl in front waved. "Hi, Mr. Whitmore." "Morning." Her father paused. "Glad this worked out." "So am I." They continued toward the launch. Just neighbors going to the lake under an arrangement that finally described reality. Later, I walked toward the sycamore. Grass had grown over the bronze survey cap again. I cleared it with my boot. 17 years earlier, Dad had stood there and told me a neighbor could use your gate without owning your yard. Lorraine had spent years proving why that sentence mattered. Silver Pines installed one small sign beside the approved corridor. Authorized resident access. Remain within marked path. No community waterfront. No exclusive shoreline. No language suggesting the land belonged to anyone except its owner. Near sunset, Douglas came down the path. He stopped before stepping toward my dock. "Mind if I come over?" I smiled. "Sure." He joined me beside the water. "Board meeting last night. Should I be nervous?" "Your dock never came up. Best meeting you've had all year." He laughed. After Douglas left, I stayed outside while the lake turned orange and the last kayak crossed the cove. My hand settled on the stainless steel cleat. The scratch from Lorraine's zip tie was still there. I could have polished it away. I left it there. Some marks are worth keeping. Lorraine fined me $2,000 because she confused community standards with authority over property Silver Pines never owned. I didn't take the lake from anyone or keep families locked out forever. I made the association acknowledge the boundary it should have respected from the beginning. My dock remained mine. My shoreline remained mine. The gate could open again because everyone finally understood that opening it was my choice. Justice wasn't keeping people out. Justice was hearing them knock before I let them back in.